Hey there. I will try to explain certain aspects and topics around e-commerce platforms. And before we'll go deeper into specifics and some edge cases and very granular approach, um, we need to take a look first on some bigger blocks that are present in this space. So from that perspective, I put together a couple of slides in Miro to explain a bunch of things. So in the world of e-commerce platforms, we have a lot of players, and those players are all here in the brown sector according to the build width. So basically, they chosen this color very right way because it is difficult to differentiate them. They all pretty small, have small market share, and have different specific small differences. As well, there's obviously like really fractional shares of enterprise level e-commerce like Salesforce, Commerce Cloud, SAP, and other giants and things that are basically tailored to like 0 point multiple zeros, 1% of the market. So what's really going on is that we have three most popular platforms, and one of them is WooCommerce, another one is Shopify, and another one is Magento. And Magento by itself is split in between the enterprise and community edition. So you can't tell that smaller businesses and businesses with low revenue use Magento, or like enterprises use Magento. So like everyone use each of those platforms. There is no specific case where you would say, okay, we need to switch to another platform because we now like a bigger business. It all depends on their specific strategy. Obviously, if we're talking about corporate, like big corporations, they like to switch to Magento Enterprise because there is an organization behind, and there is a way how they always able to reach out for help, even though their developers in-house or the agency they work with would basically disappear, or like they minimize the bus factor, so-called. In case of WooCommerce, there is a specific difference, is that WooCommerce is the community support only. So you either can find agency and work with this agency or some developers, but in case of larger problems, you don't have like a one single point where they actually supposed to help you because you pay the license fees and stuff like that. But it is a big community, it is popular solution, people don't think about it so much, and it is easy to start, it is easy to get in troubles, you own all the risks, and so on and so forth. So we'll focus on like those three major players, major platforms. Each of them represents a specific segment. So for example, Shopify, on the other hand, is a way how to start cheap, but still have a support, which means that you're basically able to make a call or like go and talk with someone from the Shopify and actually still be able to do a lot of things by yourself with little to no engagement from the developers. And at the end of the day, the startup cost would be pretty low, as well as the risks are handled by platform itself. So the fraud prevention, security concerns, a lot of other stuff, and like payment processing, which is the most important part, is actually handled and covered by Shopify. And it's not about Shopify is amazing. It's about the model itself. So let's say any SaaS platform would do this. BigCommerce, Ecwid, many other SaaS platforms. So any cloud-hosted SaaS platform would do this for you. But in our specific case, it is Shopify. So moving forward, I made like a small comparison table of each of those solutions. And essentially, we'll go one by one. So one of the biggest difference between those platforms are the source code and the ownership in general. So this way, we have a thing that is hosted somewhere and someone else taking care of, about all the aspects. On the other hand, we have open source, we have access to the code base, it is hosted by ourselves, we taking all the risks and responsibility and technical effort to scale this hosting, scale up, but it's also very important to scale down, because even though you would nicely able to scale up, you should also have a path to scale down to basically lower your costs. So all the things are on us in the case of WooCommerce, Magento, and self-hosted platforms like those. Support. Support can be different. So in majority of the cases, it would be a community support, because open source means a race to build a community. And in case you have problems, you can reach out to community, but this community would answer tomorrow, in 2 hours, or never. So there is no one to actually make SLA and stuff like that. On the other hand, there is a limited amount of platforms that offer commercial SLAs and commercial license, so-called enterprise. So basically, that's why Magento is so popular, because they create a peace of mind for corporate and bigger players by delivering their enterprise license. But for the smaller players, they still have this community edition that actually allows them to jumpstart and essentially start their journey. But by the moment they actually arrive to some sort of revenues, they already sold into this platform and using it for a long period of time. So support is either community or enterprise, so-called SLA stuff. In case of SaaS, this support is included into the subscription. So you always have someone you can call, you always have someone who maintain documentation for you, and so on and so forth. But it's not given that they would essentially go and do something for you. They would always help you, but they would not take into their hands. That's why you have Shopify experts. That's why I have BigCommerce experts. So they creating sort of community around as well. Scalability, as mentioned before, on the ownership level, scalability is handled either automagically in case of SaaS, or it's more be properly said PaaS, like platform as a service. And in case of the self-hosted, you actually plan ahead of like what would be going on. And in case you have a lot of traffic or you launch a successful campaign, you can easily put on a needs your hosting, your server, and this way just lose the revenue, lose the traffic and stuff like that. Obviously, you can configure and play around with auto-scaling on AWS, design your infrastructure the way that it would handle different amount of traffic and stuff like that. But again, it costs. And it costs development hours, which means it would be pretty expensive. Cost of ownership. So cost of ownership is various just because, in case of self-hosted, just because it depends on what platform you are on and how actively you're working on customizing your storefront, customizing um, your customer's experience on your store. So if you run on WooCommerce, you can do this pretty cheap. If you run on Magento, the Magento developers cost more, so this is very, and there's more enterprise clients, so it's a little bit different market on the resources side. So everything would cost more. Magento eats more resources on the server side. So let's say you would have 100 SKUs shop that is being visited by 1,000 users per month on WooCommerce and on Magento, looks identically. To make the same performance, to make the same user experience, Magento would eat more on hosting costs and just require more resources because it is a bigger cow and it just consumes more. On the other hand, in case of SaaS, the cost of ownership is low, and I'm putting it into the brackets because it is low at the beginning, and it can become more and more expensive, but at the end of the day, it would be same expensive as going on the self-hosted custom solutions that are higher in a hierarchy. So let's say it would be more expensive than WooCommerce, but it could be the same expensive as Magento. So what's going on here is that when you're starting up, you essentially have a lot of things being in place for you, sort of solid base with a bunch of features that are actually in place and could be launched and working for you in short period of time. So the initial effort is way lower. That's why the costs are low. And then depends on, is it like one and done, or you actively working on your store? It could vary. So by going into the specific platform, even though it's SaaS, even though you're saving on hosting and saving a lot of headaches, saving on a lot of risks, you essentially still have a limited supply of resources, of human resources, developers who could help you. So they need to learn very specific platform. They need to familiarize themselves with the documentation, with specific way how this platform works. And it is not much of them. So the hourly rate would be high. Cost of customizations. So we're moving forward into the customizations topic. And in case of customizations for WooCommerce and Magento or any other self-hosted open source platform, it is essentially medium to low. So why it is actually medium, not low, is because there is a risk cost of customizations, where on specific stage, you can actually try to change a button on the main page and explode the checkout process. So this is more into the risk part than into the actual hours spent. And there is a ways how to make it properly. There's definitely ways how to build the process. So obviously companies work on those platforms, and they're pretty successful on those platforms as well. In case of the platforms like Shopify and BigCommerce, the cost of customizations are higher just because you're not only building the thing you want to build, this custom feature that you want for your store, but you're also hacking the base that they deliver it to you. And this base is universal for all shops. So let's say you hitting the wall with a bunch of limitations. and you need to overcome those limitations. And each time you're hacking this the way that allows you to build specific custom feature, you run into the new challenges and you run into the new limitations and potential risks of incompatibility and stuff like that. So those incompatibilities could be a big problem here. And at the end of the day, the outcomes, the side effects of those custom features hacking process could be lower performance and could be explosion of specific plugins that you installed. And while the idea of one-click installs from the dedicated app stores is very tempting and looks sexy, but at the end of the day, you actually could explode a theme by a plugin or a plugin by a theme or both of those by creating your customization. So it is a bit different and the cost will be high because you're doing those things with not only building stuff, but actually hacking stuff using very expensive development forces. And what is common for both of those platforms is that they are monolith. And I would like to explain what monolith actually means. And generally speaking, monolith is that you have this platform covering all the aspects of a specific software system. And software contains, let's make it the easy way, from data, logic, and interface. So how we see, for example, right now, to open a blog post, if I'm opening a blog, I'm sending a request to server pulls up a blog post, content of this blog post from the database, and it pulls up through the logic configuration that should affect look and feel, should affect my abilities, what to do with this blog post. Can I read it, or can I read and comment, or can I read, command and edit it? Like, this is the logic. After all, it is front end, which means then the template kicks in, and the template language basically responsible for rendering static HTML from specific dynamic data points. So those informations that being pulled are represented by variables inside the HTML template, and then the final HTML is being rendered and basically sent to the browser so you can see a specific page. And monolith means that all the things are covered by the same platform and sits in this same in this specific platform as well. It is follow those specific platform requirements and ways how it is implemented. Examples: Shopify using Liquid. Some other self-hosted platforms using Smarty for template language. You have a specific way, specific structure of a theme that is enforced, and you have specific requirements on where to put this theme, what the folder structure should be, and so on and so forth. So from that perspective, that's how monolith essentially works and looks like. But aside of a lot of buzzwords and a lot of different terms that are popping up from the e-commerce, from the intersection of e-commerce and tech world, you probably heard about PWA, you heard about Jamstack, Mac, and so on and so forth. But what is really going on is that from the practical standpoint, there is two architectural patterns. One is monolith, another one is called decoupled, which means that it is being split into the pieces, and you can use those pieces the way that is most comfortable for you, your resources, and the way how you want to craft your specific custom experience. Let's take a look on this diagram here. We have different platforms, and currently each of them supports headless. To support headless, we actually require from the platform to have an API. And this API could be on a different level. So in some cases, shopping cart offer you an API, but it's not rich enough to cover the entire process of buying stuff or like operating on storefront for the customer and so on and so forth. Then we can build our logic based on the unified API way. So we manipulate the data from API, but we're totally free of how we're doing it, using which framework, using which programming language, and then we're building a front end, and we can actually have multiple front ends. So we can build a native mobile application, we can build a responsive website for the shop, and we can build a B2B storefront for the shop. All of them would use logic that is being implemented in Python, in JavaScript, in Node.js, in any stuff that we'll choose. And this logic would utilize API and would communicate back and forth. So things that going on in those interfaces, unified way, would update the data, and independently on each platform will decide to go, we're able to operate. So this is so-called decoupled approach. And the fancy marketing buzzwords for this approach is like composable commerce, or like where you can really split into more granular blocks. In some cases, they go into the new extreme and saying like microservices and stuff like that. So it's even more complex granulation approach and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the main idea here is that you have the logic implemented the way you want the tool, using the tools you have, and you know them, you operate with them, and it is independent. So it could work with the self-hosted PHP powered WooCommerce. It can work with self-hosted PHP Symfony components powered Magento. It can work with the SaaS platform that you don't even have access to the code. And essentially, that's the main idea. And let's take a look on this diagram on what is the step that changes Monolith into the headless. And this step essentially is adding an API component and removing the front-end component. So the headless platform is essentially giving you the widest possible API resources and ability to do with those API resources everything, literally. But it is removing the front end, so you have no essentially limitations. Obviously, you can have pre-built base storefronts and so on and so forth. How the transformation into the headless platform plus storefront works. So on the platform side, you essentially have database and API. On the storefront side, you have logic, different front ends that you can build with the storefront, and you can still have a nano-logic bits on the specific storefronts. So let's say one of your interfaces is a native mobile app. So inside Swift code for iOS, you can attach additional logic that would be specific for this platform. Let's say Apple Pay, I don't know, Face ID, and multiple different stuff. So you are able to include it as well. and run multiple channels. In majority of the YouTube videos and blog posts, when the authors try to explain what is headless commerce, they essentially put an example that says like, oh, it is the way how you can push your products not only on your own store front end, but also to the VR goggles, to the Apple Watch, and to like some insane ideas. So essentially, it is not so practical. Obviously, at certain level, after a certain amount of time, there would be some other channels than actually web and mobile. But currently, the biggest use case for the headless is essentially operations efficiency, filling the gaps of the platform and overcoming those platforms' limitations while still have full access to each of those platform benefits. So we know what this platform do best. We know what it is messed up, like really messed up in. So we basically make it level and actually better, more polished with the storefront as something on top of it as a layer. So let's take a look on how the monolith migration looks in case of migration from one platform to another. In the case of WooCommerce, let's say we have one shop on WooCommerce and we want to migrate it to Magento. Why we at all want to migrate? So one of the reasons is that, let's say we were operating on WooCommerce and now we bought enterprise license for Magento and want to have more peace of mind. Another one case is that we run out of SKUs, and each platform is essentially best for a specific amount of SKUs. And on the self-hosted platforms, there is actual brackets. So let's say like majority, 90 something percent of shops would have like below 1,000 SKUs, but there are some shops that have 80,000, 100,000 SKUs and stuff like that. So Magento, for example, handle this amount of SKUs better than WooCommerce, and WooCommerce losing the performance and efficiency after the 50,000 SKUs in some cases, after the 30,000 SKUs. So let's imagine we really want to migrate. So what we actually doing is that we need to migrate the data because the database structure of WooCommerce, even though let's say we'll use MySQL in case like we use MySQL for WooCommerce, we will use MySQL for the Magento. Like the database engines are the same, but the data structure is totally different. So let's say on a simple example, you would have one table called customers on WooCommerce, and it will contain 15 fields. On the other hand, in Magento, you will have 3 different tables that would relate to customer, and basically each of them would contain some subset of those fields. So moving forward, basically, we need to re-implement the logic because WooCommerce, again, implemented using PHP, it's open source. Magento is open source, also using PHP, but Magento using specific framework, specific way, and so on and so forth. So the logic would not work as like copy-pasted code. So logic should be re-implemented, even though we're not adding new features, we're not adding new any customization, stuff like that. And what about front end, the theme? So the theme in WooCommerce have different file structure, have different template language, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, you need to rewrite the theme from scratch as well, even though at the final result in your browser, it will look exactly the same. But let's take a look on how the headless migration will work. So let's say if we still would use the same platforms. So let's say we use WooCommerce and we use Magento, and we plan to use Magento. But in both cases, we plan to use them as a headless platform. in case of using them as a headless platform, we just swap the platforms. And at the end of the day, we basically have all the logic, all the custom bells and whistles we built previously on WooCommerce, all the storefronts, all the data that we transformed after grabbing from the API and displayed specific way, still displayed, still working, still looking nice and stuff like that. Is it like a no-brainer one click? Still no, but it is a significant time saver and cost saver. And what is also important is that by not being locked into a specific solution, you can actually feel comfortable and move to another platform exactly in the moment when you actually outgrown your previous one without wasting time on like gradual hacking and over hacking and trying to squeeze more from the platform that you already outgrown. So what would happen here is that backend would be swapped, the database would be migrated, but at the end of the day, this is basically it. We do not re-implement logic. We do not re-implement any of our front ends. We just have it seamlessly. And one of the other important things that is incredibly important for bigger merchants is the possible downtime. So in that case, there is almost no downtime. We can even do a pre-rollout testing by putting a load balancer and cutting a certain percentage of the traffic and send this traffic to the new platform and see like what bugs can pop out, like what can go wrong. So you do not switch it once and for all. So essentially you're able to experiment. And in general, from the practical standpoint, headless is all about being able to do more. You can do more of A/B testing. You can do more of experiments. You can do more of a flexibility like custom URLs and so on and so forth. You can do more of actually managing your content, like different content workflows and so on and so forth, without essentially contributing all of your ideas and all of your customizations that you have into a specific platform, because you're not in this business. You're not in the business of software development. You are in the business of selling stuff online. So all the things you created, all the things you thought about and implemented for yourself are actually with you. And in case you want to change a platform or you want to move entirely to the ERP as a source of data, into the PIM, like product information management solution, you fully able to do so without an NASA level budgets. So that's the main idea here. And I would say that's it. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I also hope it wasn't too boring and too complex. Have a nice day. Bye.